Okay. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WIC TV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Today, we are going to be talking about institutions. We are, in America, at an all-time low when it comes to confidence and trust in our institutions. This includes things like academia, Congress, the presidency, even the military. While it does retain a lot of trust, it is the least amount of trust that it has since we started recording. France has more trust in their military than Americans have in their military. So it's a real big problem. And we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about why we have this crisis of confidence in institutions across the board. And we're also going to be talking about perhaps ways to fix it if we can. We will have one more person joining us, hopefully, when they get here. But as of now, let's say hi to the guests. We're going to start with Brianna Wu. Oh, and before I do, just so everyone knows, I do get a check from Progressive Victory. So that's out there. Go ahead, Brianna Wu. What do you got?
So, obviously there is a deep crisis in American politics with believing in institutions. And I think part of the reason that we got here is the left is always yelling at the right and the right is always yelling at the left. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of really highly partisan arguments today. I think at the core of all of this is really we as citizens have not demanded better from our government. I think across the board, it's hard to think of a institution in American life that hasn't really been politicized and pushed to the absolute limit. So I think part of this is social media. I think that this is a time where the willingness to believe whatever you want to believe, it's easier than ever. I think the spread of conspiracy theories has added to this tremendously. But I think the really big reason is this growing extremism that exists on both sides. If you look at where I was a decade ago in my politics, I was really talking a lot more about, abortion, women's rights, kind of bread and butter feminist issues. Today, almost everything I talk about is just defending our institutions. I think the very best we get from government is what we demand of it. And I think for whatever reason, a lot of Americans have decided our government is corrupt. There's no magic system here. There's no one coming to the rescue. The simple answer is we have to stand up. We have to save our country. We have to participate. That means running for office. It means being informed. It means making compromises. We have an entire generation, I think, that sat out politics. I think it's time for us to get involved.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. We'll get into it as we go. Econo Boy, what do you got for us?
Hey guys, yep, I'm Econo Boy. Check me out on Econo Boy or my podcast, The Three Wonks. My thoughts on this particular topic. I guess it's always important to talk about the root causes, I guess. So, of course, we can agree that there's a general lack of trust in institutions over time. You can look at polling, how many, what percent of people support or not support, but, what percent of people trust in, the police, the military, the Supreme Court, the government in general. And then pretty much all those polls, you see record lows for various reasons, trust in Congress or whatever it is. And so to me, I think that some pretty clear reasons why this has happened. Number one, inequality has gone up over time. Typically, when you have inequality, whether it be some sort of social or economic inequality, obviously the two are very intertwined. You end up with social discohesion. You end up with higher crime rates. You end up with less trust in your various institutions because what the heck, I'm in such a terrible state, but these people are in such a good state in a relative sense, and so you end up with a lot of social discontent. And another reason is that the information age that we live in is just like fundamentally in some ways incompatible, it seems like, with how we evolved as a species. Social media has really caused the nationalization of politics and the internet as well, which has caused people to have much more like strong opinions on politics than they used to. Polarization's also gone up as a result of that. And I think that what we see in like the post 2010 period is all these sorting algorithms and things like that that are exposed on every social media platform, you just end up with a lot of people who just aren't really exposed to the opposite side, and so it's easy to caricature the opposite side, no matter what the opposite ends up being, depending on what you lived in. Whereas before, like if you're a farmer from like the Midwest or something, it's like, oh, you're a Democrat, I'm a Republican. We see each other every day. It's not like the biggest deal in the world. There's going to be, more marginal disagreements, and at the very least, you end up sort of implicitly being around people that disagree a little bit more often. Whereas today, it's just a lot easier to stay in your own group, right, and not really venture out and caricature the other sides. And I think the internet just kind of sorting algorithms really exacerbate that. And so I think that's one of the reasons you see that more polarized people tend to just be less happy overall, right? And they tend to be more distrustful overall. And so I think that those are some of the root causes. The last thing that I'll say is that there are countries that exist today with high levels of trust in their government, and what you see is exactly what I'm describing in those countries. You see typically low levels of inequality. You see high levels of state capacity, which is to say that the state can do a lot of things efficiently, which we don't have that in America for various reasons, which we could get into. I mean, you also see very good democratic institutions, which is to say that the government's responsive to changes in opinion and policy. The government's also typically very transparent, and the government's also typically very low corruption. So when you have all these things together, you end up with pretty high trust in government. To answer the topic directly, are institutions beyond reproach? No, of course not. I think it just takes implementing the right policies.
Okay, well, thanks for being here. Gang, let's try to keep them under a minute. I know we got a lot to say, right? But I want to get through these to get to the meat of the discussion. Parallax, what do you have for us, sir?
Yeah, I think that at least in my lifetime, I have definitely seen a degradation of trust in institutions that has continuously gone down. I very clearly remember the way that conservatives talked about Bill Clinton and the way that liberals talked about George Bush. There has been, however, a uniquely deleterious effect since 2016 due to the change in rhetoric that we have had from our candidates themselves. And it has ratcheted up the amount of distrust as well as the language on both sides, such that relative to what it was before, it's kind of embarrassing. Looking at the opening remarks, for example, of the 2012 debate between Romney and Obama, the first debate, versus any opening remarks of any debate since, will draw a very stark contrast. And I think that it is probably not beyond repair, but I'm relatively doom-pilled on the prospects of how quickly we can turn this around and how quickly we can restore that trust, especially so long as we have candidates in the spotlight that are using extremely incendiary language that acts to defy those very institutions.
Okay, well, thanks for being here, and we will get into it as we go. Until Elder Drazi, if he does show, gets here. And if he doesn't, we got another guy, and I got backups on backups on backups, okay? But last but certainly not least, Rob Noor, please.
Thank you. Unlike Wick, I'm not played by Progressive Victory. However, if any of you have contacts, I'll happily take money from them to argue Biden should stay in the race. That's something that I feel passionately about. So as a good Republican Trump supporter, I'll more than happily take money to argue that case. Everyone seems to agree that trust in these institutions has declined significantly. The question is why, and we have a lot of interesting answers. I think I have the answer. It's because these institutions shouldn't be trusted. That's why trust is going down, because they've showed themselves to be corrupt or incompetent time and time again. Now, does this mean every institution in the country is corrupt? No. If I say that, for example, medical institutions have showed corruption or incompetence, does that mean that you shouldn't trust Tylenol or you shouldn't go to the doctor? No, that's not what I'm saying. But it is clear that many of these institutions have personal motivations or motivations that benefit themselves. That means that they're operating outside the scope of what we expect, such as the medical industry, the media, our government institutions, academia, cultural institutions such as Hollywood, corporate institutions such as algorithms on social media, etc. These all amped up. I agree with Parallax in 2016, though they existed before. Remember Romney's binders full of women and he was going to enslave black people. I think that you could see that the media is almost always entirely skewed one way. And in my lifetime, they have become evident that they are no longer journalists. They're just propagandists. And the left is starting to see that, particularly people like Wick, who I see on social media, that are saying, wow, why is so many people in the media coming out against Biden all of a sudden, including telling stories that aren't vetted? Well, the reason, Wick, Wick, isn't because they've all of a sudden become corrupt or they've all of a sudden given away their journalistic integrity. It's because they feel it's the best way for their side to win power. And that's what it feels like to be a conservative or to be someone like a Trump supporter. Trump is just a symptom of the greater problem. The reason that this brash Manhattanite billionaire that has nothing in common with flyover country was so supported by them is because we were desperate for any institution or anyone with institutional power to treat us like Americans, to treat us as people that there wasn't contempt for. Because all of the media, almost all of it, all of Hollywood, all of academia, etc., has treated us like 10-tooth rubes in flyover country that are just racist and need to shut up and die. That's how we've been treated. And so Trump was the symptom that was a result of that. And you could see when there was someone as a potential outsider to the system, how these institutions all came together to attack them. So look forward to talking about specific examples. And yeah, it should be a fun debate.
We'll get into it. And thankfully, someone who I have to extend a lot of gratitude, he was willing. 20 minutes ago, I said, hey, we had someone drop out and I need a replacement. And this man stepped up to the plate. So no matter how he does tonight, thank you for being here. Elder Drazi, give us what you got. And then we'll get to the open discussion. Yeah.
All right, so I just want to check. Can you guys hear me good? I set this up super fast.
Nope, you're good.
Okay,
Go.
cool. So, my understanding is the topic is why don't we trust institutions and how can we fix it? I would say the institutions, fundamentally, you should not trust them. You should have a distrust of anything that commands the power of authority to tell you either that what you should be doing, what you should be thinking. It doesn't matter if it's medical, all across the board. You should have a healthy dose of distrust, and the ones that you find out have been lying or manipulating or basically all the wonderful things that institutions have done historically that we don't like, even less so. But by its very nature, they command too much power to not corrupt the individuals that are working within it. So you have to have some distrust of it. If something is suspicious, you should be immediately looking into it. I don't think that there's any reason that they should inherently have any trust. And it's super foolish. All the worst things in history have been done by institutions, not an individual. So I would say it's inherent, built into the structure of it.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Gang, we will get to super chats at the top of the hour, so keep them coming in. We'll read them out at 7, but we got to get to the discussion as we go. So thank you for the super chats, and I will read them, I promise. But now it's open floor, open discussion. What do we think? A lot's been said. Go ahead.
If I may, Drazi, I agree on a fundamental level that a healthy amount of skepticism is not only good but necessary in order for us to be appropriate participants in our institutions themselves. God forbid the world where we all just accept everything given to us by these institutions, right? That said, I think what we're discussing isn't about healthy skepticism so much as the actual degradation due to.
Let me just ask you right there. I hate to cut you off, Parallax, but I'll ask you: do we think?
You're okay.
Yeah. Do we think that the current distrust in institutions is this healthy?
No, it is unhealthy. I think we've reached a point. I think we've reached a point where, and this is something that I kind of took out when you said to shorten up the opening statements a little bit. I think that part of what Econoboy said is relevant, and I didn't want to repeat what he said, but access to information has been increased, and yet we have not taught people how to better parse that information, how to better sift through that information, how to better determine what information is valuable, not only in general, but to specifically the causes that you might advocate for, right? And subsequently, when you give people just a smattering of information, so much of it that it almost drowns you, you're going to be able, even for the most astute observers, you're going to be able to sneak some things by. And then you add in the degradation of the institutions and the distrust that has grown. With all of that in mind, I think that you are creating a clear recipe for people to take information, do very little critical thinking, very little processing of it, repeat it, and to spread misinformation and create more distrust.
And just some housekeeping, and I know that you just got here, but we can hear your typing, Elder Drazi, so if you can just push to talk or something, that'd be great. So thank you. Okay, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
If I may, to respond to that a little. So, first off, it would only be unhealthy to have I agree in general, it's unhealthy to have this level of distrust, but it's not my fault that I'm distrusting of it. The reason this level of distrust exists is because it's warranted, because these institutions have proved themselves to be untrustworthy over and over again. Now, I think this talking point about social media is kind of ironic. Although certainly there's some truth to it, in a world where information is more readily available, that necessarily entails that there will be misinformation that's more able to be spread. For example, something like flat Earth may have been difficult to spread as large as it has in a world before the internet, because if you had little pockets of people talking about this stuff, it would be hard to build a big online community. However, the biggest purveyors of misinformation, at least the misinformation that becomes burrowed into people's mind, are these institutions themselves. For example, Russiagate. That was an example of misinformation that was peddled over and over again by our political class, our intel level class, by our media class that was pushed on social media, etc. And the bulk of what was being said there was untrue. This was something that was spread because these groups didn't like Donald Trump and they saw it as a potential to weaponize against him. And so they spread this to the point where we actually saw that there was counter information that was hid by these very institutions, such as John Brennan, CIA, whistleblowers coming out since then and saying they actually had information that Russia actually wanted Hillary Clinton to win because they found her to be predictable. But all of that was buried, and instead we were told 17 intel agencies all came to the conclusion, and it was all garbage. It wasn't. It was one report that came out of the CIA that a couple intel agencies signed on upon. Now, this happens over and over and over again, and what happens is when we're lied to over and over again, people say, I don't trust them anymore. Yes, there will be bad actors that they come in for their own personal reasons that will intentionally spread misinformation, but the vast majority of the worst misinformation, in that it has an effect on the most amount of people and actually changes our culture and politics, came from these institutions themselves. And until there is a reckoning for these institutions, such as the mainstream media and our government, it will happen over and over again, and people will never gain their trust back in them.
Responses.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously, so I don't think that, to the extent that anything that Rob just said is correct, it kind of just goes back to my point about our democratic institutions, right? Because every country with high levels of trust in government has political controversies, has scandals, has any sort of institutional controversy that we could think of. However, the difference is not necessarily in the presence of corrupt or incorrupt, let's say, institutions. It's a matter of their policies surrounding those institutions and the democratic frameworks by which people might trust those institutions, right? So, to the extent that we might have a distrust in an institution, we might think that an institution is corrupt, right? Whether or not we agree that something like the CIA is corrupt or not, or the FBI or something like that, it's a question of like how transparently those
Econoboy,
institutions.
though, real quick. Do you
Yep.
think that our CIA, FBI, and our law enforcement institutions, do you think that they're corrupt?
Well, I'm not trying to answer that question, obviously. My point is that the answer as to whether or not they are or not corrupt is not really sort of germane, let's say, to the policies that would improve those institutions, right? So it's one thing to say, oh, well, an institution's corrupt, we just have to get rid of the institution altogether. Well, I don't really think that's true, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
federal police exist in all sorts of countries, but there's different levels of trust in federal police. Well, what's the difference, right? The difference is how democratic institutions are set up, right? It's not really the presence of federal police. So when right wingers and left wingers say we have to get rid of the FBI, I just think that that's a radical solution for what is ultimately just an issue in how we
Yeah.
set up our
I
democracy.
want to give the ball to Brianna for a moment. I know she's trying to
So
get in here.
I really agree with what you just said, Akana Boy, and I think there is one of the issues with social media is there's a disproportionate amount of focus on the scandal versus the solutions and remedies that are eventually put into place. Let me give you a really good example. When the Iraq War was going on, I protested that to the point that I ended up on the terrorist watch list. Bush had a whole scandal back then about over putting war protesters on the terrorist watch list, and every time I tried to fly, it was a nightmare. So I was very, very opposed to that. It's without a doubt we had weapons of mass destruction that did not exist, and that was the reason we went to war. We focused a lot on that, and because of that, We lost a lot of trust in the CIA, our various, intelligence apparatuses, and also our military. And I was really surprised a few months ago when I really did a deep dive on what the reforms were after, the weapons of mass destruction didn't exist. We created an entirely new branch of our intelligence apparatus to go through and kind of centralize where all the intelligence was going through, so you wouldn't have one department working on one thing, coming to one assessment, and another coming to another, and then a politician could just pick and choose what they wanted. We had an entire new office open up. Like, the intelligence reforms that were put into place were really, really substantial. This was the operation working. And yet, I think if you polled Americans, a lot of them would be entirely unaware of that. So I think that, it's not that I'm disagreeing with, well, I do disagree with the conclusions Rob is coming to. I understand why he would feel that way, because there is a conservative media apparatus that exists to feed conspiracy theories nonstop, and there are a lot of people on the right and the left that are very vulnerable to this. This is part of the human condition. It's why RFK has so much traction with his anti-vax nonsense. But I think that when government goes awry, I do think, generally speaking, in a democracy, we do have solutions for that. And I think it's a disproportionate amount of focus that is really exacerbated in the social media age.
Just to be clear, and I'm going to let Rob respond, and I know
Sure.
Parallax wants to get in too, but just to be clear, what you're saying is the primary reason, or at least one of the primary reasons that the distrust exists, is because of a push from narrative
Right.
narrative in the media.
It's this, there,
briefly, because
there are many biases in the media, and sensationalism
Okay.
is one of them. It's very difficult to cover a story
Gotcha.
about national intelligence reform.
Gotcha. Okay, respond if
May
you'd
I
like.
quickly?
Yeah.
Quick.
Oh well.
This will be very, very quick. Adding to what both of them said. I think Rob
Quickly,
will want to reply to it.
Rob's got to get in there. So
I think I want to reply to it. There are two things I would say. That one, I don't think that corruption is a zero-sum game. I think the answer is a blanket yes. These institutions do have some level of corruption,
Sure.
frankly, at all times. Two, I think that distrust in institutions like the CIA is kind of part and parcel with the institution itself and what they do. I think that the more harmful distrust that I think is become more prevalent is institutions like in the seat of the presidency, in the our functions for Congress, and in the Supreme Court. I think that our losing faith in them and the actual distrust that they've earned go hand in hand to create a very volatile mess.
okay.
Okay, so what you see here is that it's easy to just wave things away as a conspiracy theory and say that, all of this distrust is just hyped up misinformation from right-wing sources calling it. It's easy to make those claims when the very institutions that you're defending are defending sort of your...
Rob.
That's
Come on.
okay, kind of.
None of us
I'll
said
say my
anything close
piece.
to that.
I'll say my piece. Brianna, did you say that there was a conspiracy theories that are being promulgated by right-wing media sources? Did you say that?
I don't want to get into this with you, Rob, today, because what's going to happen is we're going to go down a rabbit hole, and this whole panel that's about structural distrust is going to be like adjudicating a bunch of...
No, that's not
Like
what's happening, Brianna. I'll explain what happened. I
Well,
feel
that's
that I
the
actually...
Hey, okay,
Rob,
one at a time.
please-
All of you will stop. All of you will stop, and we will go one at a time. Finish your thought, Brianna, very quickly, and then we'll
Of
go
course.
back.
Of course. What I don't want to do today is to start going through a system where we adjudicate a bunch of random conspiracy theories. My point, which I said, is this exists on the right and the left. RFK has been pushing vaccine conspiracies to California moms for a long time. This also exists on the right. It is a human nature phenomenon.
Okay, so Econoboy interrupted me to say me accurately representing what Brianna said wasn't what was said. Then when I asked Brianna, is that what you said? She says I'm not going to engage with it. Both sides engage in conspiracy theories. So Econoboy, perhaps you should speak for yourself and not Brianna, who's unwilling to defend her own positions. Now, she's going to say that things are conspiracy theory and she doesn't want to get into the specifics of them. It would have been the same if I hand-waved away her concerns about the Iraq war by saying, these are outlandish conspiracy theories. We don't want to get into it. You're anti-American. You're you're a misinformation peddler, you're a conspiracy theorist. Oh, that's what the Bush administration did. And people like Brianna that would have been marching with people like me that were against the Iraq war, that had a healthy distrust of our military industrial complex and CIA, were correct in that instance, just like I'm correct in many of the instances that people like Brianna would call me a conspiracy theorist. The difference that's occurred now, and it was one of the greatest propaganda victories in history, was the very people on the left that used to be the most distrusting of institutions like our intel agencies, our executive branch for things like Bush and the intel agencies lying us into the Iraq war. What happened was they had a president in Barack Obama who basically came in and continued all of those policies. And then we had a president named Donald Trump, who is the avatar for everything that the people on the left hate, who said, wait a minute, I have questions about the intel agencies, to the point where Chuck Schumer told us that he shouldn't question the intel agencies because they'd find 6 ways of Sunday getting back at him, which is actually exactly what they did. And that's all it took for people like Brianna to go from protesting the Iraq war and being conspiracy theorists against organizations like the CIA and our military industrial complex to now being their biggest defenders. And we could go through issue after issue that shows they lied. For example, you say that they lied in Iraq. I agree. I say they lied in Libya. And they took a country that, granted, had someone who was a bad leader in Gaddafi, but in Africa, that country was doing pretty well. It had really high literacy rates, high levels of home ownership, etc. And now, because of the lies that were spread, it now has open-air slave markets, and there's no hope for them. Or the lies we were told for 20 years after spending trillions of dollars in Afghanistan, that we were told things are going swimmingly. We've almost turned the corner. Trust us, the Afghan security forces will prevail when we leave. And they failed in 3 days. Now, these sorts of lies occur over and over and over. Ironically, we talked about social media. Without social media, how would we have known that when Joe Biden had egg on his face through his disastrous Afghan pullout, where he closed Bagram Air Base, and then we relied on the very Taliban that freed ISIS, who then failed our soldiers, resulting in 13 of them dying? Remember when Joe Biden resolved that by killing ISIS-K, and everyone in the media went along with it, and everyone in the Biden administration went along with it? And then it was only because of citizen reporters and social media where the story went viral that actually it wasn't ISIS-K.
Okay,
It was
let
a
me ask
translator
you-
and his family. Let me finish my point real quick. It was a translator and his family that were killed. Now, these sorts of things, this is why there's distrust. This is just one instance, the U.S. military. The more information that gets out there, the more we can see that they've lied over and over. But you could go through a history of it and see that actually our media has worked hand in hand with groups like the CIA for years, peddling their nonsense because they felt that it benefited them personally to get more access to these government
I
institutions.
guess I'll just ask you directly.
Wait, hold on. I was brought up there. Can I just respond super
Sure, you haven't had
quickly,
enough speaking time. You're doing fantastic.
So I just want everyone to notice what Rob did. He completely mischaracterized what I said. That's not what I said. At no point during the Iraq War did I think like there was a conspiracy theory at the CIA. I thought that exactly what was reported in the New York Times, that there was a rush to intelligence and there was political pressure being put on the CIA. And because the process for gathering that information, it allowed the Bush administration to pick and choose the intelligence reports that made the strongest reports to basically claim that there was WMD in Iraq. The question, Rob, you and I come to 2 different conclusions here. It's not that I can't point to police scandals or CIA failures or economic reports being cooked or things like that. I see that. I read the newspaper. I see those same stories. We have 2 different conclusions about how to handle it. I think, and what I would propose to everyone out there watching this today, we have a responsibility as citizens to go out, get high quality news sources, be informed, and demand from our elected officials smart reforms when things don't go wrong, which they will in a democracy. From what I get from your point here is we need to burn the entire system down. It's not trustworthy. And I don't think that's true. I think if you look at other countries around the world like Russia, they would kill to have a democracy like ours, as flawed as it is. And I think like you just take our processes for addressing this for granted.
I do
He
want
brought me up, so I'd like to respond.
Sure,
I
I'm
guess that's
gonna.
the more point, so-
I just want to ask you directly, Rob, though, and this plays into this, and you'll get the chance, and I want to make sure everyone else gets a chance in here too. But I want to ask this question because it's important, right? So, she characterized your position as wanting that the only way to reform these things, to fix this problem, is to burn it all down. How accurate is that? Do you think that media? Let's use media as an example. Do you think that there is a solution to the media, and what do you think that is?
Well, of course there is, right? Like, and this was something that Econoboy said that I think's erroneous. You haven't heard me say burn it all down on almost any of these institutions. Now, he claims that, for example, if I would say we need to get rid of the FBI, because there are other countries that have federal policing forces, that means that I don't want the United States to have a federal policing force. That couldn't be further from the truth. It'd be very similar to in the Jim Crow South. If you found a particular police department that was blatantly racist and was targeting black people, I wouldn't have a problem completely removing that police department and then instilling it with brand new people, even if it had similar powers. In fact, this actually happened in, I believe, a county in New Jersey where the police force there were considered so corrupt, they got rid of them and replaced. For example, the media, like there are many of these people in the media, as we see this story blowing up in the institution defenders' faces. And this is sort of the irony of Brianna's solution there. Notice, by the way, the red herring that they're presenting. Instead of talking about whether or not I'm correct about these institutions being corrupt, they're like, yeah, there's some level of corruption. We're not going to get into the specifics that you talk about necessarily. And instead, I'll falsely claim that your argument's to burn everything down, and I disagree with that, projecting onto me what they want to argue against.
Rob,
because they
how
can't argue the fact.
much of the
I'm getting
media?
to the point.
I've got a specific to talk about.
Oh, yeah, we'll
Sure.
get to you. But like, so you keep mentioning that they're hand waving it away. But just to ask you
Sure.
directly, of the stories that come out in the mainstream media, how much, what percentage? And I'm not going to hold you to the exact numbers here, right? But give me a guess. What's your intuition here? How much of it is bullshit?
I don't know, right? I would say that what I can say is this. It's not that they're interested in being journalists. That's not their agenda. Their agenda is being propagandists for their people that they want in power. Sometimes the truth helps benefit that. Other times it doesn't. Like the fact that they lied to us for years, and particularly in the last year, about Biden's cognitive decline. Now we're seeing stories come out that are saying, oh, we knew months ago. Oh, we knew it was weird that he was telling us what questions we had to ask, or that he wasn't having story after story coming out. They intentionally hid that. The only reason they're telling it now isn't because it's the truth and all of a sudden they're qualified journalists. It's because they realize, oh shit, our agenda of getting Democrats to win is now in jeopardy, and so we think that Biden needs to be replaced. And I would say it's similar, if we don't mind, because we've been a little chippy here, so I'll make it a little chippier. I would say that Brianna's entire shtick is very similar to that. That all of a sudden, she didn't seemingly have much to say 2015, 2016 about radical leftists on campus that were going after speakers like Milo Yiannopoulos, Ben Shapiro, etc. I could be wrong, and she could show me the tweets or her messaging if she wants. But all of a sudden, once it started, the infighting hurt the Democratic Party, when all of a sudden these radical leftists were going against another group that prominently votes Democrat and Jewish people. Now she wants to speak up, not because she is against the radicalization, because she sees the radicalization of hurting her party now. Unlike the other side, I'm not interested in lying about obvious things like the radical nature of people that are violent and radical on the left, or the cognitive decline of the president. No, I'm not. Go ahead and find me one time ever advocating for any sort of violence or downplay.
No, I meant lying. I'll get to that in a moment. Go
Sure,
ahead.
let's go.
So you were just completely inaccurate in your representation of the Afghanistan pullout. You want to talk about it?
Sure.
I actually think that you're demonstrating the issue I have,
Go for it.
which is that we get surface level information and we don't actually parse through it. So, for example,
Go for it.
it was a disaster when it occurred. However, President Trump, when he started the pullout, when he negotiated with the Taliban, had 13,000 American soldiers on ground, boots on the ground, and by the time he left office, there were 2,500. So to put that at the doorstep of the Biden administration when the alternative was to inject more troops is disingenuous at best, or ignorant. I don't care which. It falls into the misinformation category either way.
How does any of that prove anything I said being incorrect? Show me once that I didn't say the amount of troops that were there under Trump was downplayed. The issue was this. There was a base level of troops that were there that were preventing attacks from groups like the Taliban and ISIS. We had a secure air base that wasn't being attacked by terrorists, whether it be ISIS or the Taliban. And Joe Biden himself decided, before pulling out the tens of thousands of Afghanis that helped us and the American citizens and our weapons, what he did was pull back the actual troops that were defending Bagram Air Base, and then relied on a civilian air base. And because we no longer had enough troops, meaning far less than 2,500, we had to rely on the Taliban for defense. That same Taliban went into Bagram Air Base and freed ISIS, and then ISIS launched a terror attack that killed Afghanis and 13 troops. You tell me where I spread misinformation on any of that, or admit that you mischaracterized me and you yourself were lying and spreading misinformation.
No, I absolutely think you had a malicious intent when you failed to mention everything I mentioned about Trump pulling out 10,500 of those 13,000 troops, and you put it at the doorstep of Biden. I think you're being wildly dishonest.
Did Bagram Air Base exist with adequate defense when Joe Biden took over?
2,500 troops of 13,000
Was there
remaining in
any
Afghanistan,
terrorist
Rob.
attacks on Bagram Air Base or on our U.S. troops in the area until Biden pulled out of Bagram Air Base?
That's got nothing to do with
Right. So
Biden's
then, in
pullout.
other words,
Nothing
what
to
you
do with it.
did was what you've done is you said I've spread misinformation because I didn't say something that was completely unattached to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
the
It is
topic at hand.
entirely
Okay,
attached.
okay.
Yeah,
I understand.
what I thought.
I understand that we're going to want to like adjudicate specific points, but I want to bring us back on topic because the overall discussion is going to be about institutions. Elder Drazi, you've been trying to get in here. I want to give the mic to you, and then we'll
Thank you.
get into other. But I do want to keep this from spiraling down a rabbit hole. I want to make sure that we're talking about institutions in general. Why is it bad? How did it get that way? And also, what can we do about it? And I want to get to that. But go ahead, Elder Drazi.
So this applies to institutions in general, but I'm going to use America as my example. Brianna Wu mentioned the WMDs. This is a really, really good example because I lived through it. When our government does blatantly lie, and this seems like a case of this being a blatant lie, that they didn't actually think this, and they manipulated public opinion, there's no accountability. When you have an institution that can lie to its people and nobody suffers the consequences, no real consequences are paid, it doesn't seem like there's much incentive to not continue doing that. There also seems to be a lot of conflation on everybody's part between misinformation spreading through the media and the distrust in the institution, institutions broadly. A lot of this misinformation propagating is because it's like a LARP for a lot of people. At least on the conservative end, a lot of them are like QAnon and the larger groups of like conspiracy theorists. It's not really about not trusting as much as it is being a part of the group. Because there's always been conspiracy theorists. But until there's been a way to network them and then get them all like hyped up on each other, it hasn't really been like this. And so when you have a history of using malicious tactics, manipulating your own perception of what you're doing, you should automatically be distrusted. And when there is absolute ability, you can't regain the trust. People need to go to jail. People need to pay
Go to
fines.
jail.
There
That's
has to be some
fines, jail,
ramifications for these
those-
things happening. That's how you rebuild.
Okay, that's
How you rebuild trust. People have to get in trouble.
That's what I wanted
agree.
to ask the panel, right? And I wanna start with the Kana boy, then we'll go to Brianna Wu, and then we'll get to Rob and
Just
Parallax.
one last thing.
One
the
last
best
thing.
example of why we shouldn't is Edward Snowden. If you look at that whole situation, that inspires a lot of distrust in the American people, rightfully so.
Okay, so Elder Drazi mentioned some of the repercussions that should happen, some of the consequences that should happen when an institution lies to the people are fines and jail time. Do we agree with this? Why or why not?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think that if you were to find that an institution was sort of purposefully lying to cover up a scandal or cover up, hide data or something like this that would be valuable, or like, make opaque what should otherwise by statute be transparent, then of course, that whatever the ordinary prosecution process should be. Now, obviously, I think that I think the big difference is going to be obviously like how we would view someone's intentions, right? Similar to what Brianna said, like I think where like Rob and I might like fundamentally disagree is how bad faith the intentions are of these actors. I don't really think that somebody like, and I'm not saying Rob would say this, I'm not really sure, but like take Dr. Fauci for instance. I feel like a lot of people in their heads, whether you be right or left or whoever, people who hate Dr. Fauci essentially, in their heads they're like, Dr. Fauci is a piece of shit. He's a liar. He's a con man. He wants to hide things for this, that, or the other reason. When, I don't know, for me, I feel like you see a very difficult situation. You see a man actively acting as both a public communicator and as someone who's trying to delve into the data and understand exactly what's going on. It was a chaotic situation altogether. And to that degree, that's why like I don't even necessarily blame the Trump response totally. Obviously, I think that there were mistakes made even contemporarily that I would call out, but I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, Trump's a piece of shit. He just wants millions of Americans to die. That's why he did this COVID policy. Like, I'm not going to, no, of course not. He might be a dumbass. He might be incompetent, but I'm not going to, create some theory in my head about how he's trying to kill people or something, just because that's actually what did end up happening. And so it's a matter of the actual reasons as to why they're doing certain actions. And again, the last sentence that I'll say is, again, governments all over the world have scandals on a consistent basis, right? But few governments struggle quite as much with trust as we do. It's a matter of our democratic institutions, not a matter of which particular institutions exist or not.
So can I answer your question that you asked a minute ago, Wick? I'll do it super quickly. So the question was, is it good for people to go to jail if they break the law? I think that's true, but I think
to be clear, not to break the law, but when they are found to have lied or covered up or been dishonest with the American people. But I guess and I'll let you answer this first, right?
I may have misunderstood it.
No, it's fine.
Please proceed.
One of my major issues with that line of thinking of they lied, so they should go to jail. How do we adjudicate? And Boy mentioned this. How do we adjudicate they were lying versus they just fucked up, right?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. I think in a democracy,
trials,
generally speaking, sending elected officials to jail is a dangerous path if it's not something that's really, really over the line. Like, say, Rod Blagojevich in Chicago, basically trying to sell was it a Senate appointment for favors? That was a situation where he did deserve to go to jail. I think all of us would probably agree. The big problem is a real failure to hold politicians, and I think even our own party, to account. One of the reasons I was so thrilled to see the election in the UK the other day is, Labour the Tories had run that government into the ground, and there had just been year after year after year of no accountability. I thought that was really, really good. So what I want to see is a culture of us expecting more of our elected officials and not being afraid to vote in primaries, vote for someone else. I think that's the fundamental problem, is the voters are choosing to not hold these elected officials accountable.
To push on that just a bit,
sure,
though, right? I think that might be fundamentally incompatible with what some other people here are advocating for, which is if you are dishonest or if you fuck up, you will have a trial, right? You'll be put on trial and go to jail or be fined or have some other negative consequence. At least for my period in the military, and I can speak with some experience on this.
Sure.
Right? If you fucked up on certain things, you would go to jail, right? Like, so when I was a crew chief, we would have the report, the little flight checklist thing, and we would have to sign off on how accurate that was. And if you had a red X condition, which is grounding the plane, right? A red X condition, and you didn't check that properly, or you let the plane fly with that condition still in place and something happened, you are criminally liable for that. But the unfortunate side effect of this is, at least as the trickle down, is it leads to people not doing anything at all, right? Because anything they do, there might be a consequence for, right? If you fuck up when you're repairing that and you cost the government $1 million or something, you get screwed over. And so what a lot of people would do is nothing, or as little as possible. And so when we want governments to do more for us, right, to get in there and to fix some of these problems, one of the reasons I think that a lot of them don't is because, unfortunately, we punish you when you mess up, but you don't get rewarded when you succeed. But that's just my thoughts. I could be wrong, but I want to get other people's opinions.
I'll jump in if no one minds. I sort of you have to be careful, right? Because we're talking about more than just governmental institutions. For example, the mainstream media. Should someone in the media go to jail if they lie? No, right? Let's be honest. And the same is true of people in government. If there are mistruths that are spoken, that doesn't necessarily mean you go to jail. Now, there are certain things that we would say potentially. So Econoboy brings up Fauci. If Fauci lied under oath, which it appears he did, about whether his institution was funding gain of function in a Wuhan lab, then absolutely that is something that he should be punished for legally. But if he just lied, and speaking of why we don't trust institutions like Dr. Fauci and the medical institutions, this is something. Please raise your hand if you disagree with this. Here's something we can all agree. Fauci came out initially and said, don't worry about getting masks. Don't worry about it. They won't help you. Right? And then, like 4 weeks later, he's like, never mind, we had to lie to you because we were afraid you were all going to go out and buy masks. But we knew all along they helped you. Now, that's a noble lie. He shouldn't be prosecuted for that, but he will term that as a noble lie. He'll say, I lied for good reason. But the problem is that lie creates real distrust, because if he lied to you there, when he's telling you that you can't go to work and you're losing your home and you're losing your small business because of it, is he lying to you again? Because he thinks the greater good means that you have to be lied to? And so that lie necessarily, I don't think would be one that he should be prosecuted. But the lie of lying about gain of function under oath, that's one that potentially could be prosecuted. Or people on his team, it seems evident from their emails, they were intentionally subverting Freedom of Information Act request and the way that they were communicating. That's something that could be criminally punished. But not everything that is a lie from the government is something that would be criminally punished. Now, I think it's
just
ironic
when the left does it, right? When the right does it, it's
Well,
noble and great and awesome. But when the left does it, it's pernicious.
It's funny
and
you would bring
malicious,
that up,
right?
because I'm going to make the exact counterintuitive point. Actually, I've been quite consistent for things like mishandling of classified information, FARA violations, etc., because they're so prolific in our country and they're almost never charged. I didn't think that people like Biden or Hillary, etc., should have been charged. Neither did I think Trump should be charged. I think it's hilarious, though, to hear Brianna say it's dangerous to charge politicians when we see everyone and their mothers trying to charge Donald Trump, even running on promises of getting Donald Trump, making new legal theories, resulting in things like banks that were happy with him and there were no victims. He has to pay $500 million in fines, and alleged FEC violations that the FEC said weren't violations or didn't charge him for. A novel legal theory that's never been used on anyone, let alone a former president of the United States or frontrunner. They're going to use it to charge him with 39 felonies. Oh, by the way, did you see today that a court just overruled that actually Hillary for America and one of their super PACs actually violated the very same FEC law in claiming that they was using an internet exemption when they were spending their PAC money, and falsified records saying that it wasn't campaign expenses, but it was other things. The very thing that Trump was accused of.
This speaks
Yet
to
they're not
distrust.
going to be charged.
This speaks to distrust in
Of course.
institutions.
Well,
and I
hold
wanna-
on, Wick. If Rob is going to attack me and mischaracterize me, I need to just ask the
Go ahead.
right to respond to it. And I don't want this to be the show today. I have no interest in doing this with you, Rob. I'm recovering from surgery. I don't want to get in a fight with you, but I'm not just going to sit here if you're going to do this, okay? What I said, and everyone can go look at the tape there, is I said for extreme cases of wrongdoing for a politician, and I used Rod Blagojevich in Chicago as an example, I think it does make sense in that case. In my view, Donald Trump does rise to that level, and that's what I said. So
Okay,
I
but
don't
just
wanna
to be
go
clear-
into- I don't want to go into it all day. This is not the
Brianna,
thing
I
was
don't
saying
understand.
before.
I don't understand your position. I'll just say this. I'll just say this quickly. It seems like you're trying to perpetuate your status as a victim. This is sort of what these panels are about: is getting into issues and going back and forth. And from the get-go, it seems like you're very reticent to talk specifics.
It is
with
a
me.
fire hose of bullshit, Rob. You
I
just
think-
spew bullshit,
ahead and
and
interrupt.
we can't have a conversation.
Okay. So go ahead and interrupt. I understand why you'd be reticent to want to get into specifics with me, because I think you'll know the outcome. So I think my interpretation of what you said there is very accurate. You tell me if I'm wrong about this. I'm trying to steelman you. You said, of course, there are extreme examples when politicians should be held legally accountable.
Do you
However, we
disagree with
must
that,
be-
Rob?
Let me finish. However, we must be very careful, because it does set a dangerous precedent charging elected officials. Is that a steelman of what you said?
Whatever. Dude.
I'll step in. Yes, I think that is a steel man. However, right? I think that do you disagree that there are things an elected politician could do that rise to a certain level, that despite that there are some dangers to this, that we should prosecute them anyway? Do you disagree with that in a
No,
vacuum?
Wick.
No.
Okay,
Okay,
no,
so
Wick,
what's
and
the
let me-
argument?
Here's the argument. The argument was that there were 2 points being made. Of course, there are times when things are so serious that they need to be prosecuted. However, in general, we should be reticent to want to prosecute lesser crimes because it sets a bad precedent. So then the point I directly make in response to that is, look at some of these cases against Donald Trump. For example, the FEC violation, where no person in history has been charged under this legal theory that Bragg went after Trump for. When we know, in fact, that Hillary's team actually violated the FEC code. Twice they've been found in violation of it, which means that because they were based out of New York, they falsified business records in New York, which was to infect the election. And they did so by violating FEC laws. That's literally the same law that Trump broke. And yet in New York, they decided not to go after them for felonies. Instead, they paid a fine.
So what I'm saying,
let me finish real quick, right? So what I'm saying is, when Brianna's admitting that unless it's a very serious crime, we shouldn't go after politicians, I agree. That's been my stance the entire time. It just so happens that even when we're coming up with novel theories going after Trump for anything, the E. John Carroll, where they changed the law in New York to go after Trump on that case, the case in Letitia James, where the banks were happy, but we're still going to go after a former president for $500 million. All of these are cases you could argue, okay, the classified document case, the electors case, but we're talking about cases where people basically ran on getting Trump that are nothing cases.
Here's the issue.
Brianna seemed to say that we shouldn't be prosecuting those sorts of cases.
No one here.
I've got a question for you.
I'll let you go in a second, but I just, because this touches actually, surprisingly, gang, and
we're close.
It touches on the topic at hand of trust. I can't trust anything you just said, Rob, because not just because of you. It's not. I don't want to mean this. This isn't a personal attack against you specifically. I want to make that clear. But there have been partisans on all sides who will just say things, and we can't. I have no time to fact check any of that right now. I just can't. Right? I'm trying to manage you all, have this conversation, all these things. So I can't believe you. Just take your word, unfortunately, for this. And so what you said could have been completely accurate for all I know, but it also could be total bullshit. Now, that doesn't to say that you don't believe it's true, right? I'm not calling you a liar in this instance, just to be clear, right? But we have so many different sources of information, and no one can trust any of them. And that's a situation we find on ourselves. One of the downsides of the institutions having degraded throughout America, and I will say this, that there is good reason not to trust any of these institutions. They have failed us. And one of the unfortunate downsides of that is it decreases trust overall, so no one can trust what is true, what is not, and we are all we're choosing our own adventure, gang, on what facts we believe, what sources we believe, and we have no more kind of epistemological foundation. But Parallax, you wanted to go in? I'll let you
Rob,
go.
did I hear you correctly when you did you say that as it pertains to like prosecuting politicians, you by and large agreed with Brianna, but you're pointing out the hypocrisy that when it came to Trump, the left turned on that?
Yes, I think that overarchingly that we should be reticent for particularly small level crimes to prosecute politicians.
So then you were wholly against Trump running on the same campaign promise you just lambasted as it pertains to Hillary Clinton?
I thought that Trump running on lock her up for Hillary Clinton was a really stupid thing to do. I didn't think it was necessarily corrupt because we already saw that the FBI was looking into it. It seems that the Democratic standard is the things Trump said that never came to fruition are things that we all need to be scared shitless of and are corrupt. But then when we see the Department of Justice weaponized to go after Trump and prosecutors basically running on the promise of going after Trump, getting elected, and then going after Trump, Democrats are remarkably silent about it. So yes, I did argue at the time, and I argued against the prosecution of Hillary Clinton for a classified server. The only crime that I thought should have been charged in that whole debacle was when Hillary's team intentionally destroyed subpoenaed evidence. That doesn't mean Hillary did it, but someone on her team the guy's name was Paul Gambetta, that knowingly destroyed subpoenaed evidence, that seems to be a crime serious enough that there should be some sort of charge. However, in the only time we know that in any of these investigations where subpoenaed evidence was literally destroyed and was unrecoverable, for some reason the FBI determined in that case to not charge and instead give immunity to everyone. When they went after Trump's team, they decided to do the exact opposite and charge anyone connected to him with any crime, even if it was unrelated to the underlying investigation.
So just two small things I'll touch on, and someone else can go ahead and pick up the ball. I think it is worth noting that anytime it seems like we want to look at the other side, you've got a great justification for Trump. You know, it wasn't necessarily corrupt. You just didn't like it, but it's corrupt when the left does it. I also think it's worth noting that Brianna made a valid point, the fire hose of bullshit, and that is how you just replied. You know, you didn't actually reply directly. You just gave me a whole bunch of extra bullshit about Hillary. I think you do actually. I think it's very specifically detrimental to the conversation at times, and I think that it is taking us away from the topic at hand.
Yes, I agree.
The exact opposite is true, actually. Almost always when I'm asked a question, I reply almost specifically with a yes, no, and then I will expound. Whereas the people like you'll say that I'm lying or I'm spreading misinformation when I accurately represented the Afghan pullout of Joe Biden, and you say, well, the reason is because Biden. For example, can I say that you spread misinformation on Afghanistan if I show that Obama wound down the number of troops in his 8 years in office? Would that mean that now you're spreading misinformation because you didn't accurately say how many troops Obama pulled out?
No, one of them is the specific final pullout plan that was no, and you know what you're doing right now. One of them is the specific plan for the pullout that Donald Trump started and Joe Biden finished. They are not the same plan that you can tie back to Obama.
Everyone can see what happened. Everyone can see it was Biden.
Yeah, they absolutely can. You're being dishonest. Absolutely, they can see it. Everybody can roll the tape.
It is that they could roll the tape. They could see that there were troops left there. That Joe Biden removed those troops. He closed down Bagram Air Base, which directly led to ISIS. It's not
up in Iraq before it stopped.
Some racist boys.
If it's a fire hose, then here's what I'll do. Then I've given you a lot of targets to say where I'm inaccurate. So pick one of those things that I said and say it's inaccurate.
I already did.
Did Biden close down Bagram Air Base? Yes or no?
Like, I don't know if Parallax is interested in talking about Afghanistan.
Of course he's not. Neither is Brianna because they don't want to talk specifics.
That's not true.
No, that's just not
hold
the
on,
conversation.
Hold on. Everyone's trying to go in. Econoboy wanted in. He hasn't talked for a minute. Give it to Econoboy. Let's give the ball to Econoboy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally open to the next panel if we want to talk about the Afghanistan pullout.
Yeah.
You know, I obviously have a lot of different views than Rob Noor does on that, at least the perception of that. But forget about all that. I think what would be interesting would kind of try to point us towards that direction of looking at solutions for this. You know, he mentions imprisoning people or giving fines and stuff like this. I feel like overall, you know, fines is obviously, I mean, if you break, I mean, it's one thing to say we shouldn't throw a certain president or a certain congressman in prison. But I feel like fines should be, you know, totally open board. I think that back to one of the first things that I talked about, two things that I think would be really good to increase our level of trust in society, let's say, overall. Number one is a lot of concerted policies to address economic inequality. I talk about that a lot, welfare state expansion, you know, government service, you know, efficiencies, things like that you can institute, just things that generally would reduce inequality, but also have a more radical view when it comes to social media. You know, again, I think these sorting algorithms are a real problem. Again, like the fact that we have so many instances where people can, you know, they watch one Paul Joseph Watson video and all of a sudden they're down this incredibly fucking strict rabbit hole. I think that's probably a problem as well. So banning that kind of thing, I think, is probably pretty reasonable. I don't tend to argue for just banning things in wholesale, you know, throughout the entire economy, obviously, unless they're, in my view, really, really bad. One of the things that makes democracy work
real quick, specific.
Yeah.
You want to ban Paul Joseph Watson? That's what you're saying?
No, I said sorting algorithms, right? So, like, I don't care if Joseph Watson, I don't care if he makes a YouTube video and people want to watch it, obviously. But the problem is that if you've got like a 15-year-old who watches a single Young Turks video or a single Paul Joseph Watson video, and then all of a sudden they're down this rabbit hole, which seems inescapable unless they make a new account in an incognito window, that's probably bad. And the reason I say that it's bad is because, again, part of what makes our democracy work is at least some fundamental trust in democratic institutions. And I would say, in general, some fundamental trust in a sort of shared social contract, right? And I think that starts to break down when people are funneled into these radical enclaves more and more over time. Obviously, social media and sorting algorithms aren't the only thing that does that. I just think that that's probably something that we could talk about as a means to solve this problem.
So the problem I have, I'll let you go in a second, Brianna, but I want to address this because I think it's an interesting point, right? There are obviously problems with sorting algorithms and things like that. But then you get into the secondary question is who decides, right, which of these things needs to be struck down and how to sort this information. Like I can't think of and this might be just a failure of imagination on my part, so forgive me, right? but I can't think of an entirely neutral system, because one of the things
I
that
can.
we like about social media is it does give us things we like. Like when I go on to my YouTube, I want to see certain things. I want to. That's good, right? I like that. I want to see like this type of music because I like that. I do want the ability to change it up time to time,
Well,
but I
take
want
YouTube.
to be fed the things that I like, right?
There was an internet and a social media that existed before these sorting algorithms that was still pretty robust. There were
Yep.
still viral videos. There were still, like, take YouTube before sorting algorithms really took off. It had a homepage with top viewed videos of the week, month, and year that you could almost sort of like Reddit. And you could subscribe to specific people that you wanted. And obviously, if something went viral, everybody heard about it, right? The only difference between YouTube today and back then, at least not the only difference, obviously, but like the big difference that we're talking about here is, again, you click that first video and all of a sudden you see 28 other videos just like it. Now, I understand what you're saying, Wick. On one hand, well, it's kind of nice that I see the content that I like, right? But what's not nice, obviously, is that this does clearly have a negative effect on our democracy and our democratic institutions and our social cohesion, right? And so you have to kind of just weigh those things. In my view, the YouTube that we had, say, before 2015 or, whenever, I'm not sure the exact year that these kind of things took off, that YouTube was just fine, right? That Facebook was just fine. That Instagram was just fine. And we didn't have these huge problems with people sorting themselves into enclaves and essentially, internet-wise, never being able to escape it. And again, this is only a problem that's going to, expound over time. People are spending a lot more time inside. A lot more people's entire lives are online. Gen Z, millennials spend so much time on social media, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. If we, set up those institutions in a way that doesn't create such toxic environments, but we just haven't done that yet.
The second thing I want to, and I promise I'll get to you, Brianna. I promise, right? Here's the thing. Addressing inequality, you brought that up too. I don't think that'll work, because how will you ever know, right? One of the big drivers of the Vibe session, right, has been just people being doomer about the economy, being doomer about life, being doomer about America, being doomer about foreign wars, everything, right? And that is driven a lot by perception. So I don't know if simply fixing inequality, it's not going to do it right now, because no one will ever know it's fixed, because there is incentives by journalists and others to make you think that the economy is as bad as it's ever been. If Trump gets elected, you'll see a switch. You'll see a flip will be switched, and everyone on the left will start saying how horrible the economy is, and everyone on the right will start saying how great it is.
Well, sorting algorithms exacerbate that problem, but I'll take you to a time in the midst of the Great Depression, where we had a government in office that was elected in the midst of the Great Depression. Obviously, this government, FDR's first government, had quite a big task in their hand, even before World War II started, of course. But FDR had several years in office where social discohesion was really, really high, economic inequality was really, really high. And what did he do, right? He basically did what I'm describing. He passed huge welfare expansions. He lifted millions and millions of people out of poverty. Lyndon B. Johnson takes office and does the same thing, both from a political inequality perspective, but also economic inequality perspective. And what do we see, right? We generally see inequality going down. We see poverty going down substantially. And overall, I just think that that's probably it's
also
not that
discohesion,
discohesion,
right?
it's not that polarization. Well, right, but it's not that polarization and discohesion are like 100% solved by decreasing inequality and instituting a ban on sorting algorithms. But if I just had to pick a couple big things that would decrease social discohesion and lack of trust in institutions, those are a couple big things that I think would be 45% of the problem or something.
Brianna wants to get in. Let's let Brianna in. Go ahead.
No, I think that's really well said, Akana Boy. I think Rob is really showing us one of the biggest barriers to this, which is you've got people on each side, and just so it doesn't get personal, I'm going to use my own side as an example here. Something I've talked about a lot lately is trying to steer the trans movement back to a more science-based approach to public policy and a more electoral approach, right? And it's like you can go and come out with example and example and example and example, and there's a worldview where this is wrong and this is wrong. And you can just avalanche. You're a transphobe. You're this. You hate this group. You just go straight down it. And it's impossible. The temperature gets so high so quickly. It is impossible to have a discussion about, oh, actually, this study just came out that shows that both TERFs and trans rights activists heavily lean into victimhood narratives, and they aren't really good at showing the science accurately, right? Which did actually happen. So I think that it's almost a human nature problem that we're coming back to, which is why I liked what you said, Akana Boy. Wick, coming back to something you were talking about earlier about like clicking on the content that you liked. I don't know about everyone else here. I certainly watched Destiny's debate with Alex Jones on January 6th, and it was great content. But one of the things that made that so hard to sit through is Alex Jones has this fire hose of bullshit approach to it, where he just talks over people and he spews his worldview like Hillary Clinton, blah, 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 blah. And it's like you can't, if you're trying to sit there and start having a common sense discussion about any part of it, you automatically lose, because then you're trying to relitigate Hillary Clinton, right? Then you're trying to relitigate Burisma. And it's like, you spend so much time on defense if you agree to their terms, even if you have the best of intentions, even if you're excited, even if you read stories, even if you have a point of view that you're eager to sell. If you're sitting there trying to talk to these conspiracy theory nuts, it literally hijacks the objective, which is to have a rational discussion about public policy and where it needs to go. And there are no great answers to this. One of the old school things on the internet back in the dial-up modem days was a saying, and it is the amount of effort to refute bullshit is infinitely more than it takes to generate it. And that is all the more true in the social media age. So I think the only answer here, and what I've tried to do in my work, is I think that we've got to have calm people that can talk about this stuff and try to bring people together. And I think it's thankless work, but I think someone's got to be standing for our institutions and actively working to bring people on the right and the left together on the public policy that we can agree on. I think that's how you heal institutions.
I'm going to let Rob respond, but a little housekeeping first. After Rob responds, and I see you too, Druzzy, I need to read my super chats and make some money. So, Rob, go ahead.
Okay, real quick to respond to 3 points. Wick's big point here, which is, well, how can I trust you, Rob? Look it up. Just like the last time I was on a panel with Brianna, right? And we talked about Hillary Clinton's mishandling of classified information, and she resulted in saying, yeah, it's all conspiracy theories. I guess they should have locked her up too. What this is indicative of just trusting the institutional narrative instead of digging deeper. And you shouldn't trust the institutional narrative, particularly when they lie so blatantly about things like Biden's cognitive health, about things surrounding the pandemic, etc., which we can get into those specifics. Now, you can see that this entire panel that we're supposed to be talking about, are these institutions trustworthy and what should we do about it? Everyone is gung-ho to not talk about the specifics as to whether or not these institutions are trustworthy, instead to talk about anything else, potential solutions, etc. On that note, Econoboy, about the algorithm, I don't disagree with you. I think that algorithms are a huge problem. I don't know if 2015 is the exact way to save it. I think it was better than it is now. More so than YouTube, I think algorithms like Google actually have more effect. In fact, Professor Robert Epstein said that he, through a study, saw that as many as 16 million votes could have been switched by Alphabet, the parent company of Google, to the Democratic Party in the 2020 election because of manipulation of the algorithms. The truth is, a 2015 style, more free and open algorithm on places like YouTube is what led to people like Donald Trump and populists like Bernie Sanders, even on the left, getting more power, because more people, when they weren't under sort of the control of just the narratives that were coming out of the mainstream media, there was more of an organic messaging that led to people getting these sort of populist message, realizing these institutions haven't been truthful or trustworthy in many ways. Mike Benz talks about how what happened was the intel agencies saw in 2015, 2016 with Brexit and with Trump, that all of a sudden the CIA and other institutions that saw the free and fair internet as beneficial to them when they were engaged in things like color revolutions around the world, they started to see that it was detrimental to them back home. And now we see intel agencies working in tandem with social media companies to censor points of views that they don't like. We saw that about COVID. We saw that about Russiagate and other such things. And that's actually perpetuating as we see going forward. To talk about Brianna's criticism of me specifically, I'll turn the criticism on her. She says that it's people like me.
Not addressing it.
That's fine, Brianna. You don't have to address it. You haven't addressed
No, I'm
anything
saying
in
you're
this
not
debate.
addressing anything I said directly. You're just going to flip it on me. Here we go. Fire hose time,
Right,
y'all.
right,
Let's go,
right.
boys.
What she's trying to do is gaslight. So Brianna can't keep up on the specifics because it's not really a left-right issue. Now, again, I sat here patiently while you all talked at great length. I've only interrupted once or twice, and it was to ask a pertinent, specific question, not to moan on and make faces like you do, Brianna. You started off this debate being antagonistic to me, accusing me of being a conspiracy theorist, saying that things weren't... Anyways, you started off doing that, and then you seem to want to play the victim, which is something that you see quite frequently.
You're playing the victim right now, bro.
Which is
Your
something you see.
feelings are hurt. I'm so sorry I triggered you. I've been trying so hard to avoid it the whole time. I will triple down for you. I promise.
Which is something that you see is common with people like Brianna. They aren't capable of keeping up intellectually or with the specifics, so they have to use broad-reaching phrases like, you're a conspiracy theorist. Let's use the very example that she gave, talking about TERFs and talking about new literature that comes out describing medical procedures in the trans community. Imagine that Brianna said, well, actually, Rob, here's what the newest literature says, and I just say, that's all a conspiracy theory. I'm not interested in talking the specifics. Brianna would rightly say in that point of view, that's not responsive. You're not talking about the specifics. You're instead just attacking me and being dogmatic because you're not interested in the specifics because you have an agenda that's pre-confirmed to what your beliefs are and you don't want to hear anything that's antithetical to that. And that's exactly what Brianna's doing. The people that have called people like me conspiracy theories were wrong over and over and over again. They're wrong on COVID. They were wrong on Russiagate. They were wrong on Biden's cognitive decline. They gaslit you on these blatant things, particularly Biden's cognitive decline, and called people like me and millions of others that saw what Biden was becoming right in front of our eyes conspiracy theorists. Now they want to tell you, oh, forget about all that. You should still trust us. We're the calm, sensible
But
people.
you've been saying that since 2020, Rob.
That's right. He did have cognitive issues since 2020.
We don't believe you because he was obviously did not have the same issues he did then as he does today. Do you know the story about the boy who cried wolf?
Wick, I know the story about the moderator that needs to try to desperately hear his own voice to save the people that are getting crushed in the debate, but I don't have a problem debating you as well. Do you want to bring on 5 more people? I could do that as well. It was obvious that Biden was having cognitive. It was obvious that Biden was having cognitive issues in 2020. There are reports coming out today that talk about the fact that he wasn't taking press conferences, that basically spent the last 3 months not campaigning because he knew that he wasn't the same politician that he was in places like 2016. A report came out today, I forget who it was from, that said that they were shocked that Biden even ran for president because he was having family issues and was having cognitive issues that were evident in 2020. Of course, those issues have gotten worse year to year.
And these we can trust because obviously they go in with our narrative, and therefore the institution's trustworthy and these stories are totally true. But when it goes against our narrative, then that's when the corruption in the media hearts. And no, I won't give you any specifics. I'll just generally allude to these things, like the time that Dr. Epstein said that Google switched 60 million votes. I won't provide any details. I'll just throw that one out there. Hope someone takes the bait, right? We don't actually.
And now immediately move on to the next point.
And we'll immediately move on, even though it had nothing to do with the point was done. But do you guys remember when the narrative, right, from the Republicans, right, was that Biden tried to kill President Trump, and they had this whole narrative, right? Now, does it have anything to do with the point at hand? Not really, but I'm going to throw it out. So that becomes a discussion rather than the topic at hand. Now, I'm going to read these super chats because money, I like it, right? And then I will give you a chance, Rob, to respond, and you will have the floor. Cool? Cool. Let me get to these super chats.
He's had a lot of floor.
You've all had a lot of floor, okay? Right? But
no.
Okay, $5 from Still Alive. Any of you guys happen to watch Alan Lichtman completely dismantle Cenk Uyghur's argument in his video against him? Didn't see it?
I did.
Thank you for the $5. Did you like it? Was it good? Was it worth a watch?
Alan Lichtman, his credibility is really high because he's predicted like every presidential election. But presently, his analysis seems to be very unintuitive.
Fair enough. 2024, A Gay Odyssey, $2. Rob Noor is a real American. Pray for January 6ers. Thank you for $2. $5 from Cameraman 502. Has anyone here read Yuval Levin's A Time to Build? I think we need to start basic points, definition, and purpose because otherwise you fall into partisan. Thank you for the $5. $5 from another new account. Who was the commander-in-chief in 2021, Trump or Biden? Zephyr Hash, $20 just to say hi. Thank you. And then $5 from another new account, Wick. I didn't know you were a vet. What branch? The Air Force, the best branch, okay? Fly, fight, win. If so, you know how the chain of command works. Why then do you blame Trump for decisions Biden made? I don't think I have. But if you can point me something specific, I will address it. I don't know what you're referring to. And then $5 from Neighbor Guy. Brianna, instead of just saying Rob is spewing BS, can you provide one concise fact that Rob has provided that's inaccurate? Thank you. Okay, and thank you.
Sure. There was last Truth to Russiagate. COVID was real. January 6th was a insurrection. So there's 3 of them.
Okay.
What about Russiagate was real?
Rob, I don't want to go into. I'm going to decline to the fire hose thing. It's not the topic. I'm not going to do that.
Cool. I didn't say anything about January 6th. I didn't say COVID wasn't real. So way to beat those straw mans down there and can't give one example on the thing definitively that I talked about. To answer Wick. Now, of course, Wick didn't take a stance, person that put the super chat in, because Wick likes to hide behind this convenient moderator seat where he could pretend like he's a moderator when someone questions his absurd worldview, but then he could sit here and act like a debater when he's trying to save the lefties on the panel that are incapable of doing it themselves. So yes, it's true. Wick isn't taking hard and fast stance. He talks about the narrative of Biden's mental decline. Want to know what my evidence of the narrative is? The fact that we could all see Biden, including at the debate, significantly show cognitive decline. Now, I understand people like Wick that wanted to downplay that post-debate and downplay it pre-debate, and the people that said cheap fakes, et cetera, want to talk about this. Want to try to gaslight you into thinking they didn't talk about it. Let me give you an example. The New York Times, Karen Jean-Pierre, et cetera, all said that 3 weeks ago when Obama was shuffling Biden off stage at a fundraiser, that it was a, quote, cheap fake. Now the person that held that fundraiser, George Clooney, came out in an op-ed, I believe in the New York Times today, and said, it was evident to all of us there that there's some significant problems with Biden. He's not the same guy, blah, 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 blah. Now, we were told just 3 weeks ago by almost the entirety of the Biden administration and the mainstream media that these were cheap fakes, that this wasn't real. And it was a blatant lie. And now we're seeing story after story of people saying, we've known about it for years. We've seen the evidence for years. Biden hasn't engaged with the press like previous presidents. We knew there was something going on. People close to him have admitted there was something going on. But they all lied about it, and it shows that they shouldn't have been trusted because they gaslit the American people. Because the truth is, they think that they're not journalists, but they're advocates that are better than you, and the American people didn't deserve to hear the truth.
Yeah, they're telling you the truth now. They lied before.
I'll say real quick,
don't believe them.
I know you want to debate,
now,
Rick, so we'll get you. The last thing I'll say real quick, when you
I'll
talk
go ahead.
about, like,
I'll
I
take it.
just threw out Professor Robert Epstein, I'm happy to talk about any of these issues that you would like. It was just buttressing off the point that Econoboy talked about algorithms. If you want to delve into that study, I'm more than happy. At least I'm trying to talk about specifics instead of the people from Progressive Victory that are paying you, Wick, that just want to say everything's a conspiracy theory. I don't want to get into details.
I'm giving you details of why you're wrong. I've done so several times,
Robert
right?
Epstein's wrong because go ahead.
We'll go.
I think that
really quick. So, Rob, it's not that. So again, right? Like I'm down to talk specifically about because you haven't mentioned any solutions, right? You've said
Yes.
look at all these descriptive things that have coalesced. I think you said you might agree with me on banning sorting algorithm, but whatever it is, right? We already have all agreed for various. It doesn't matter why we agree, right? But we all variously agree that trust in institutions is very, very low. Now, why that trust in institutions is low is important. You're talking about a ton of discrete examples. It kind of falls into the same point of, well, institutions lie. It's like, okay, sure. Like we've actually all kind of agreed that institutions lie sometimes. Whether or not we disagree on the lies that they tell, that's not germane to what we do to solve it. And we already agree that institutions lie sometimes. So obviously, it's more important to talk about, well, how do we solve the problem of institutions lying? That's what you haven't really talked about. That that I can hear.
Sure, I can.
Yeah, I want to build off of that. I was told I could go next. I'm going to go ahead and go. I think that the problem, Rob, with the discussion as you perceive it, is not that Wick is jumping in so much as we haven't begun to discuss the issue, which Econoboy is saying in a lot more words. Every time that you speak, you do spew about 20 different little factoids that may or may not actually get us to anywhere we're discussing the failure of the trust in institutions and what we're going to do about it. And I think what Econoboy is doing is trying to remove some of the heat from that fire by saying, hey, let's talk about the possible solutions without talking about the specifics of the issues. It's not that people can't or don't want to engage with you. It's that we are here for a specific topic. Now, I will agree, Wick seems to be talking a little more than normal tonight, but it's probably because one of his panelists seems to want to rattle off 37 different things, as it was pointed out, like a fire hose every time they speak, that don't actually pertain to the topic we're here to discuss.
What's the topic, Wick? Can you read it?
Institutions, are they broken? Why do so few Americans trust them?
Wow. So wait, I didn't hear anything about solutions in that topic specifically, right? I heard, are the institutions broken and why do so many people distrust?
Now, in the description, how can we fix this? So this
Okay.
is the description. Academia, Congress, the Supreme Court, the presidency, even the military, every single institution is at an all-time low when it comes to trust and confidence. Why? How can we fix this? How can we recover? Come find out. And if you rewind the tape back to when I introduced the topic to everyone, I did mention, as Econoboy pointed out, that we are going to be talking about solutions here. This is going to happen, right? I don't understand why you are saying that this wasn't part of the discussion. This should be...
No. You got it backwards, as usual, debater Wick, who's also trying to be a moderator. I was just told that this was the topic as it was sent to me. Institutions in America, broken beyond repair. Then you went on what the title was that even you had at the beginning of this. And then in your explanation, you did include a part that said, how can they be fixed? Now, I'm not the one who said it's off topic to talk about how they could be fixed.
What are you even saying?
Please let me finish. Instead, I'm being told by people on this panel, me discussing how these institutions are broken and why people don't trust them.
I promise you, I'll set up a debate on Afghanistan. I'll set up a debate on cognitive decline for Biden. I'll set up a debate on all these topics. We can have that discussion. That is something that we can... I will debate you on the cognitive decline thing. Me and you can go. We can get a moderator, okay? But for today, what I brought everyone else here to discuss and what everyone else seems to have been able to kind of glean from our discussion is we're going to be talking about why this is a problem and what we can do to fix it. So let's talk about it. Let me ask you directly, Rob, how can we fix the institutions that are broken in America? What is the solution? Can you give me a specific plan or solution, or even just a guess, right, on how to make this better?
Right. I could give you an answer to this, you condescending prickwick, and my answers have been talking about why these are broken. The first step to solving any problem is to... Go ahead, Econoboy.
Acknowledge it. I disagree with your framing of the topic. Obviously,
what's the first step to solving a problem, Econoboy?
Really quick. So
Brianna?
The way that I understand the topic, it says...
You said you could answer and then ask other people to answer?
So our institution's broken.
I know the answer. You know what the answer is. That's my answer.
So,
let Econoboy go.
I did answer.
Let Econoboy go. Go ahead.
So the way that I understood the topic, it was our institution's broken. If they are, what can we do to fix it? Now, the reason that, personally speaking, the reason that I gave reasons as to why the institutions are broken, again, your reasons are institutions lie and the institutions are bad. It's like, okay, fine, that's your reason. The reason I gave reasons wasn't to get distracted in terms of whether or not there's a high amount of inequality or our democratic institutions are bad. It's the reasons why these institutions are broken, in my view, informs my solutions for them, right? That's why I talk about welfare state expansion and, changes to the media and things like this, sorting algorithms, right? And so that's why I'm pushing you to say, okay, we get it. Institutions lie. You think they're really, really corrupt and bad. Okay, so what do we do about it, right? So I understand your reasons. We agree that institutions are broken. We've all answered the first part of the topic. Well, what do we do about it, right? That's at least to me, that's the interesting part.
Brianna, what's the first step to solving a problem?
I think Wick is the moderator here, and I'm going to stop letting you lead the panel. Econoboy, I want to go with something you just said. I think another really big problem that we have is the information that's out there. Something that's really changed in my lifetime is I can remember when the primary place you got information from was an actual newspaper. I think this move to a free model of news that we get online, I think it's ironic that we're all reading more and more than ever before, but so much of the news is partisan. I mean, even high quality news sources like Vox, I think it's fair to say they have a very specific bent to them. So, something I think that we should be looking at is actually subsidizing the news business or giving it tax breaks or looking at some way to make it just sustainable, particularly local news. We are focusing so much on federal politics tonight. In my experience, local politics, that is where the corruption really, 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 really happens, and local news is absolutely shrinking. So I think literally one of the biggest problems with declining trust in institutions, all of us agreed that the corruption is getting worse, the insider use of the power is getting worse. We don't have high quality information to even hold the people accountable. So I think that's a major component.
Hey, Parallax, what's the first step to solving a problem?
Recognizing one.
Thank you so much. At least you're honest and actually answered, unlike the two people above. Wick, would you agree that's the first step to solving a problem?
That is,
Actually,
but
that's the first step. That was the first thing we said, Rob.
Yeah,
was
we
there
already
was a problem
passed that.
with our
excuse me,
institutions.
Institutions
We
are
agreed
broken.
that there was a problem, right, Rob?
There is
No,
not.
Rob, I want
Okay,
you to
enough,
answer that
enough,
question.
enough,
You
enough.
ask the
All of
question,
you,
I'll
all of you, all of you, all of you, all of you.
Did we
I
agree?
cannot.
You
Okay,
did.
okay. We have 5 people here, right? Not including me. I'm the 6th. Okay. We
You're
have
the moderator.
2
Wick.
people talking.
Supposed to
okay?
be.
2 people talking. Okay. We have Rob talking and Brianna and Econoboy talking. We haven't heard much from Elder Drazi, and he has given us his time last minute. I want to hear some of his thoughts because he also agrees, like we all agree, we've all already agreed, institutions are broken in America. All of them are broken fundamentally. We all agree on that. You're shaking your head like we don't agree. Does anyone who here thinks our institutions are fine? Raise your hand.
Do you think the reason that the institutions are broken is because such as the media are propagandists and not journalists?
Because of a host of reasons, including that. Yes, I think that's a problem.
Really? You all agree with that?
Rob,
That's
do you have a
fine. I
potential?
misunderstood if that's what you're saying.
Do you have a
I have,
proposed solution
I
of
have
any
very
kind,
radical
Rob?
views on how we should organize our news media, Rob, but we haven't been able to talk about that.
Because you don't agree. You're pretending to agree, and this is something that happens quite frequently.
Of
You're
course.
not pretending. I promise you. None of us are lying.
Who
Well, I don't
disagrees?
know
It's
if
not
anyone else is lying,
true.
but I'm
That's
not
Who
lying.
disagrees that that is not a massive factor? Is there anybody that disagrees that that's not a massive factor?
No. Okay, so then when I say something like, "Oh, I racked WMDs," and Brianna says, "Oh no, that wasn't an intentional lie."
Okay, because
It's clear that we're-
oh God, Rob, here's why this doesn't it works, but it doesn't work is because then we have to fight you on whether or not we agree that specifically was a lie. When we can all acknowledge on the left and the right and the center, everyone here agrees that there have been incidents of the media just being propagandists and lying. We might disagree on when they've done it, but we all agree that there's been many incidents where, again, throughout the years, not just recently, but throughout the years, where the media's just fucked up and lied to the American people or helped politicians cover up very bad things. We all agree.
That is
Great.
not
Let's move on.
That's not agreeing with what my stance is. That's fine. We could move on, and you need to pretend that you're agreeing with me. When I go on after this and I talk about the corruption of our mainstream media, the Biden administration, be happy to say that all 4 of you admitted that you agree with me on those things. When we talk, I'll be happy to. Then you'll of course say, "No, we didn't agree with Rob on those things."
Because
the difference is you're saying that there are small individual events that you could say, "Yeah, maybe something like that happened."
No,
but
it's
ultimately
systemic.
those are-
It's systemic.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's
Econoboy-
false.
Econoboy already addressed
but
this, yeah.
Econoboy has to go. He already let me know in like 5 minutes. So I want to make sure he gets a chance to have his last say. But Rob, none of us disagree with you that there's a systemic issue and it's only getting worse. Not just in the media, but in academia, in Congress, in the presidency, even with executive power having been expanded since I don't know, fucking Bush, right? Out the wazoo. It's an issue, and we're all seeing it. Let's get to the solutions. Econoboy, because we only got 30 minutes left, but Econoboy, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I've got to dip out a bit early. We're shooting our weekly Live and Learn podcast. That's our name. Anyway, so yeah, I think as an analogy, right? This would be like if let's say the debate topic was, is the healthcare system broken? and let's say all three panelists on the stage say, "Yep, I agree, it's broken. Here's what we can do about it." Right now, let's say one of the panelists said, "The reason that the healthcare system is broken is because of the capitalist institutions that, it just goes off of all these things, right, as to like why it's broken." And it's like, guys, look, okay, you say it's broken because of the capitalist institutions that got, set up the for-profit evil healthcare industry. Okay, well, what do you do about it? Well, the reality is that the capitalist institutions are destroying the healthcare system. And it's like, okay, we get it, right? But I think that what's important is to always link why you think the institutions are broken with why you think that certain solutions should be had, right? I just think that that's a more productive conversation. Rob, the only solution I remember you mentioning was getting rid of the FBI and then reforming the federal police. So like, getting rid of it, firing everyone, and then, hiring, I guess, the people who are good, I guess. I don't even know how you would define that. But you talked about the Newark City Police getting abolished for the same reason. It's like, okay, I mean, that's an interesting thing that we could have talked about. It's just that I think it's a little bit not very productive the way that we've gone about it. Again, we've tried all these individual descriptive events. Anyway, overall, yeah, institutions are broken. I think there's a big problem with our institutions. The way to solve that is lowering economic inequality and really taking a serious look at social media and how we organize our news media. But I got to hop out. It was good. Good. Thanks for the invite, Wick. It's always fun.
I hope you enjoyed it. So I'll talk
Sure.
So
I
it's
always
one
have
of the
fun talking
discussions
with
of all
Rob.
time.
Okay. See you guys.
Bye-bye. Okay. Eldrazi, I was trying to get you in because you've been very patient. Go ahead.
So Econoboy had a good point about the reducing inequality. The way that you do that in a way that affects is to have clear and transparent economic plans with time and follow through with them. When politicians our economy, they talk in really ambiguous terms. They're very vague. They talk inflation and say that we have to do something about it, but they don't really allude to like clear-cut plans that the average person can understand.
You're cutting
But
out.
also, Econoboy kind of. Oh, is this better?
Yes,
Any better?
I think so. Go.
Okay. Econoboy kind of touched on it a little bit, but I said that I think that people should be prosecuted, and this was just sort of shot down like right away. We didn't discuss why. Say that it's bad for politicians to be prosecuted for being dishonest. I think when our institutions are in the state that they're in, I think that it's I'm kind of okay with taking this risk. If you're saying that politicians are going to do nothing, then maybe we'll get them out and it will incentivize more honest politicians who actually want to make positive changes for our country to take their place. I don't know if there's going to be a super strong response to that. And I think part of the distrust in our institutions, at least the political institutions, is like what we've seen here. The actual things that people are concerned about and care about get pushed aside for petty fights and drama.
Can't hear.
Okay.
But I'd be really interested if somebody could respond to the
responses to that?
Yes,
prosecuting
I will
people.
respond. I will respond. Of course, there needs to be consequences for the people in these institutions. Now, I responded to this directly. There are obviously things that you can't prosecute people for. For example, if Eric Swalwell goes in front of the media and says, "I didn't bang that Chinese spy," like that, I don't think you could send him to jail for that. If he testifies under oath to that, that's a different question. The idea that you could just prosecute people, and we're not just talking about politicians, we're also talking about people in institutions like academia, the media. You can't just say anyone who lies should be prosecuted. Now, what you're getting to, though, is a fundamental truth. There certainly needs to be people for the most egregious things that need to be held criminally responsible, such as those in the FBI that intentionally sabotage particular candidates, illegally spied on them, etc. There should be prosecutions for that level of sort of law breaking, but I don't think just lying rises to that level. When it comes to people were talking about solutions, again, correctly identifying the problem is the biggest part of the solution, because we can't use the legal system to go after many of these institutions, such as the media or academia. So what you do is call out their blatant lies and manipulation so that the people rightfully distrust them even more, which will organically lead to different areas of media coming up and a group of people that will no longer trust these large institutions institutions. So sort of the problem's already solving itself in places like the mainstream media. Ironically, Brianna gets it exactly wrong, where she says maybe we should have the government fund these institutions. We've tried that. That's called NPR. They're one of the biggest purveyors of misinformation. And again,
Not true.
that is absolutely true.
Objectively not true.
Absolutely true.
Hold on, because you both are just going to go back and forth. Brianna, can you point to the reason he's incorrect here?
Sure. I would, Rob, after this panel, I'll be very happy to show it to you, but I've seen many studies that show NPR viewers and listeners are some of the highest informed. They are lowest on things like believing misinformation, and I personally believe that saying NPR is like a mouthpiece of the government is one of these things the right wing repeats until they're blue in the face and people actually believe it. I don't think there's any evidence for it.
Okay, so
here we go again. It's like down the rabbit hole that has nothing to do with the fucking topic. Here we go.
So this is what's interesting. This whole debate's been this. I'll say something specifically relating to the topic, and then someone will say something specifically back to it. So Brianna said, I want to talk about solutions. My solution is to have state-funded media. So I say we have a state-funded media. I find them to be distruthful. Your response is that's not true, and it has nothing to do with the topic.
They're
not trustworthy. So
Let's
for
see if we
example,
can find some studies about
for
this.
example, you'll be able to find studies from another institution of academia that
NPR
also is trustworthy.
Hold on, Rob. I want to ask Rob directly. Who do you trust, right? Why do you trust alternative media anymore? Can you produce any evidence that they are more trustworthy or more accurate than other media sources?
First off, there's no one media outlet that I trust wholeheartedly. There are people and media outlets that I think have been more correct on major stories than others, but I always try my best to get varying biases. So I like listening to people like Jake Tapper and Anderson Cooper and reading the New York Times and the Washington Post to get things from one side of the ledger. And then I like reading people like Mike Cernovich or people like Mike Benz or people like John Solomon to get things from the other side of the ledger. On many of these stories, all of those groups have been wrong on certain things. So for example, an NPR audience, for example, despite what some study will show you, when we see audiences like NPR that are predominantly left, we see that left-wingers were far more wrong about the severity of COVID. Like they thought that the death rate of COVID was something like 50%. The infected fatality rate. That 2/3 of Democrats in a 2018 YouGov poll said that Russia hacked voting machines to steal the election for Trump. So the idea that they're not purveying misinformation is just fundamentally wrong. Of course, institutionalists like Brianna that like the direction that misinformation is going.
Personal attack has nothing to do with the subject.
I mean, again, you could say it's personal attack, but I'm saying that people like you that like NPRs because when their misinformation benefits your side 99% of the time, you're going to say, oh, they're mostly truthful. I don't see a problem.
99% of the time. That's the claim. We're going to come back to that.
Okay, show me a story that NPR has been inaccurate
this is literally the first fucking Google search, Rob. You look it up, media bias fact check. This is what it says. It says NPR, let me finish. It says the bias rating this is in your favor. It has a slight left bias, though is primarily center. The factualness of the reporting is rated high. The traffic of it is high, and the credibility rating, according to MBFC, is very high credibility.
What is MBFC, just out of curiosity?
It does not say here. I'm reading the detailed report, but I'm sure if you looked at this, you can go through it, and it
Media
gives
bias fact check. It's the site you're on.
Excellent. Oh, thank you.
So this is the point. Rob is coming through. This is why it doesn't make sense to go through and fact check every single one of this fire hose of false claims, because we can sit here, we can just Google it. It's the first result. Rob claims that the very first result is Rob claims that NPR is like a government mouthpiece. I look it up. The very first result shows that it's not. It shows that it's high credibility. It's got a slight left-wing bias. Fair enough. Maybe we should look at that. And it goes through and gives a whole bunch of examples of the reporting being mostly neutral. He makes claims that 99% of the time it aligns with my point of view. And it's just not true. There's no evidence for this. So we will spend the 2 hours hunting down all this horse shit, and they will never get to talk about any of the stuff I actually prepared for with this panel. The conspiracy theory nut jobs are a huge part of why we cannot have have an honest discussion in this country about figuring out our institutions, because the crazies on one side have their mind made up on everything and have a frame to understand the world, and so do the ones on the other. It is impossible to move forward.
So we could see Brianna's tactic here is to just trust these institutions wholeheartedly. She can't tell you the first fucking thing about media bias, fact check, and if they themselves are biased, whatever. She Googles something, sees the first answer, and there. That's definitive. Obviously, that's the definitive answer. Not that Google's algorithm itself.
Rob,
They've already said, please.
I will tier 3 subscribe to you if you could verify your claim that that left-wing media was claiming 50% mortality rate on COVID. I will, whatever your highest tier sub, I'll do it right now.
All right.
And while you turn to Google, as you just lambasted Brianna for, I'll point out that not only does Brianna's Google back her up, but the Pew Project for Excellence in Journalism also states that NPR shares with only one other news organization a 29% split, or a 21% split between Republicans and Democrats on believability, in spite of them being a mostly factual news source. Republicans believe stories from NPR at a 21% lower clip than a Democrat does, in spite of the actual truth of the matter. And this is a major problem.
Yes.
So the problem is we could see the same mainstream media that overarchingly gaslit us about things like Biden's cognitive health, about Russiagate. Yes. And again, I understand. This is
facts don't matter. We're going to his feelings.
Victim Brianna, right? Victim Brianna. Next, she'll tell us that we're misogynistic
because we don't
like
you're
constantly interrupting. I can talk louder and faster than you. I don't give a shit. Brianna, you're a crybaby. I understand the need to fill it, but I am.
Instead of insulting each other, can you find the 50% claim? You made a claim.
Wick, if you could do me a favor, you're not a debater here. You're not a good moderator, and you're not a good debater.
I'm a showman. Okay, I'm putting on a show.
You're something.
And this is what we're doing.
You're paying Progressive Victory PAC, and I understand you're desperately trying to save Brianna here because none of you are
desperately saving Brianna. Brianna's getting on my nerves too. You're both getting on my nerves. All of you are getting on my nerves because what you're doing is you're sniping at each other instead of talking about this issue at hand. And our friend Elder Drazi is giving you a challenge, and instead of addressing the truthfulness of your claim, right? You made a claim, right? And we should probably check on whether what you're saying is accurate or not. But this is a problem. A lot of the times when I check on what you say after the show or during the show even, it turns out you're full of shit. You were wrong. Now, there's very good reasons that I've been wrong too. I get things wrong. I do. That happens, right? But if we're talking about trust in institutions, right? If we're talking about trust in general, if we're going to make a claim that we should be trusted more than the New York Times or the NPR, we should probably, it would behoove us to be more accurate than they are.
A notable example comes from a survey conducted by Gallup Frank Templeton in late 2020. The survey found many Americans, especially those that identified as Democrats, overestimated the risk of hospitalization from COVID-19. While the actual hospitalization rate for COVID-19 was much lower, a significant portion of Democrats respondents estimated it to be 50% or higher for unvaccinated individuals.
You said mortality rate, not his hospitalization rate.
Maybe I did. You're right. Okay. So it was that hospitalization, not mortality. Now, the reason I heard this was because I listened to left-wing cultural people like Bill Maher, who lambasted the left for this. And it was evident that Democrats the entire time through this thought that the fatality rate and the hospitalization rates of COVID was far higher than what Republicans thought, and they were far more off on that. So if you're
people
going
that
to
didn't think it was fake were more worried, is that your claim?
If you thought that COVID was fake, what do you mean fake? You're telling me that there was a significant amount of people that thought COVID just didn't exist. That's
yes.
Okay.
I have spoken to doctors. I have spoken to doctors myself who had patients refuse COVID treatment, demand to be treated for something other than that because COVID isn't real. Yes, I have spoken to these people.
It wasn't a large percentage of people that thought COVID wasn't real. The majority of people thought that it was vastly blown out of proportion. Someone like me, for example,
that people died because they thought it wasn't real, that's a large number to me. It's not 0, and it's not just 100. You can say it's not a large amount of people. When people are dying from it, it's a big fucking deal, and it's because people don't trust our institutions.
The fact that people's lives were destroyed and died because people like you overplayed how bad COVID was. Children.
I have never overplayed COVID.
Hey!
Ever.
You
Never.
had your chance.
No.
You had your chance there. The fact that people that you
Well,
seem to
don't
be
lie about me.
Okay, fine. I don't know if you overplayed it, but the fact that it seems to suggest that you're going along that. Can you tell me exactly how serious COVID was? Because it seems that you're very quick to jump on blaming people that underplayed it. So do you think that people overplayed it as well and that cost lives?
People overplayed it, people underplayed it. The underplaying of COVID vastly cost more lives than overplaying it.
That's
You know what happened to
absolute
people
bullshit.
that overplayed it? They
What?
ended up being way safer. They
No,
ended
they
up being
didn't.
the first ones to get vaccinated. Yeah,
No, they didn't. So here's what happened to the people that overplayed it. They led to things like lockdowns. They led to things like children being set back years and years in the education system because through no scientific evidence, they suggested locking down schools.
I'm not saying it didn't
Years and
happen, but who
years.
died because they overplayed it?
The people
Yes.
that... Oh, you want an example? I can give you an example.
Yeah, you said
What
people
you want?
died.
Right. Because, so for example, are you aware
We're
of
gonna
the
need to
fact that...
see some numbers.
Oh, you need to see some numbers, Eldrazi? That's what you need to see? So, for example, the numbers in Pennsylvania where tens of thousands of people in nursing homes died because our governor said, we're overplaying the significance of COVID so bad that we're afraid that hospitals will get filled, so we have to send COVID patients into nursing homes. That particularly led to thousands of people dying. The same story was true in New York, where they then tried to cover up the numbers because people overplayed it. So tens of
That was
thousands of
not
people
the
in nursing
case.
homes died. Then why did they send those people to nursing homes?
Because people were sent to nursing homes for different reasons in different states.
What?
Some of them were sent there
Pennsylvania.
because so that they could get active care, whereas they had none. Some of them was due to hospitalization overcrowding, and some of them were just plain mistakes. A lot of people were making decisions very quickly. They did not have a lot of time. There was no plan set in place for something like this.
Isn't that interesting?
Can I say something, Wick? Can
I
I
was
say
told...
something?
Hold
Go
on.
ahead, Brianna.
Hold on.
I'm sure you have something intelligent
we have
to add.
10 more minutes left. I want to make sure everyone gets their chance, okay? Briefly, Brianna, and then we gotta.
just
I
wanna
want to at
say
least try to
that-
address the topic.
This is exactly why earlier in this panel I tried so hard to not start going down these rabbit holes with Rob, because look at what's happened to the discussion. Rob made a claim about NPR, and then we started talking about COVID, and he couldn't fact check that, and now we're switching topics again. And now the entire panel, rather than talking about the actual subject, is going through this fire hose of bullshit and trying to address it. It is so frustrating, and this is one of the biggest problems. We cannot fix these institutions.
Yeah, Brianna, I agree. However, I have more knowledge about COVID than anybody I know, and I cannot knowingly let somebody publicly say something that isn't true
no
about
criticism
it.
of
That's
you.
fucking
Yeah,
crazy.
sure,
I've been
I
very
understand.
good this whole time.
Sure. I'm not
Yeah,
criticizing.
right,
Yeah.
I know. You're the good person that's distressing. We know Brianna likes that. Hey, just like Connor, maybe Progressive Victory will pay you guys as well.
I
It'll be
just want to
interesting
point
see
out
how
that you
PAC
said
money goes.
overplaying the significance of COVID
Yes.
led to people dying of what?
Yes.
What did they die of? What did they die
Well, they
of?
just take a shot at
So
someone.
I'll
who's
give
not
you
here.
I'll give you plenty of reasons that they died of. One,
fucking losers.
because
The
the
nursing home
overplay...
people? Was it COVID?
Yes, that's one. Yes. Because because overplaying the significance of how bad COVID would be in hospitals was the excuse
led to
given by...
excessive COVID deaths.
What are you talking about? Like, the idea that they were scared shitless that hospitals would be overran because of COVID forced them to send people into nursing homes. So the argument was simultaneously made that we had to destroy people's lives by telling them that they were non-essential and couldn't go to work, because if you went to work, you could run into grandma and she could die, while simultaneously saying we're sending COVID patients into grandma's room in the nursing home where she contracted COVID and died.
When the nursing home things happened, people were dying, and we didn't really have a lot of information about it yet. We were trying to get things under control. We were trying to create plans. Some of the plans didn't go great. Some of the plans went pretty good.
Hey, Eldrazi,
doesn't
let me
mean
ask
that
you a
people are
question.
overplaying
Back
it.
then,
They were
in
appropriately approaching.
March, April, May of 2020, if you had to guess, even with the limited knowledge you had of COVID at the time, who were the people most likely to contract or to have a serious case in COVID and die? Give me an example of who you would thought those people were, even with limited knowledge. You know more about COVID than anyone, so go ahead.
people with multiple underlying conditions and elderly people.
Right. And so would your decision with that limited knowledge have been, you know what we should do? Send COVID patients into nursing homes where there is a higher preponderance of elderly people and people with multiple health conditions.
Okay,
Would that have been your decision?
I can't tell you how I would make decisions based on information that I didn't have then that I have now. Okay.
You did have the information, the same information they had. You knew that that was the people most likely to contract and die of COVID. And yet with that information, Democrat governors in New York, in Pennsylvania, I believe in New Jersey and others decided to send those patients into nursing homes. That's just one thing that they did. We're not even talking about the deaths that resulted from the economic collapse from locking down the world economy by overplaying this.
Okay,
Rob,
okay.
I
I
promise you my
never
best
thought
promise
I'd be in a
about this
panel.
anytime,
I never
but-
thought I'll let you go in a second, Elder Drosy, but I never thought it'd be a panel where you're blaming like these statistical deaths, like capitalism has killed like so many people, right? This is the type of argument. That's a style of argument that you're making right now. That because of the economic lockdowns, so many people died. You haven't given us a number. You just kind of vaguely gesture, okay?
You don't
But
believe
this
that?
idea, right, that like. Because of economic conditions have killed so many people, right? Like, I mean, I guess, but it isn't compelling, and it's just not. There's so many like steps to it that it just makes it really indirect, and it's I think fundamentally, let's again $5 from Turtle Emergency. I'll just combo break on this. Rob made a false claim regarding COVID mortality beliefs and now just keeps going with his talking points. Quit chasing him down these Robbit holes. And thank you for the $5. But yes, we are going to, in the last 3 minutes of this goddamn panel, we're going to please, right, talk about whether or not the institutions deserve trust. Because we have, like, we know that they aren't trusted. We know that there's very good reasons, right? Very good reasons that they're not trusted. But the question I have for the panel is the alternative better? And I would posit no. And I think Rob has demonstrated exactly why it's not better. Because as untrustworthy as NPR and the media might be, my God, they're more accurate than fucking wherever Rob's getting his sources. Anyway.
That's not true, Wick. I would destroy you in a debate on pretty much any topic you want.
Pick
and
a day next week.
For example, get a couple facts real quick. So me saying that extreme poverty kills people, you say that's outlandish, Rob. That's like saying capitalism kills people.
You said the lockdowns killed people.
I said the economic collapse that resulted from the lockdowns. We pushed the number of people, food insecurity was raised 260
Who died?
People.
Name them.
The pandemic pushed
Hold on.
97
I don't think that's
million.
the right pushback. Here's the question, Rob. Do you think more people died as a result of the lockdown than would have if we had no lockdown? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Easily. Not
That's
even close.
moron.
Okay. Show me the evidence that suggests otherwise. John Hopkins did a comprehensive report that said that there's no evidence that the lockdown saved significant amount of lives, but there's a lot of evidence that it decreased people's quality of lives and had other terrible outcomes. So give me, it's so obviously clear. For example, a country like Sweden, they didn't lock down, so surely their excess deaths numbers were through the roof, correct? Right?
No.
Why not? I thought lockdown saved so many lives.
There are other measures that they took. They very clearly did take measures.
Okay, but they didn't lock down.
They had fantastic contact tracing.
It is not the only possible
But
measure
you're
they had to
like
take.
the standard setting
lockdowns-
contact tracing.
So you mean to tell me there were things we could have done besides lockdowns that would have had better results?
Maybe.
Right, and what I suggested was if the answer was lockdowns versus nothing. I did not. You're talking about a middle ground, which I'm totally cool with talking about, but that's not what you were discussing before.
No one suggested nothing. That's nonsensical. Who would suggest nothing?
Well, you haven't.
Rob,
No, it's been 2 hours of you suggesting nothing. To be clear, you haven't
Okay, we
suggested
got
any.
1 minute, then I have to go to closings. I do have other
promise,
things
Rob,
to do.
I'll
tonight.
debate you on COVID anytime, anywhere,
Sure.
any sub-subject of it.
What are you doing
but
after this?
I feel really bad. This is kind of my fault. I give me a couple days. This is my test stream. My internet's not great.
Oh,
I
that's
got to
fair.
figure this out.
That's fair.
I'll
I'll
give me like a couple of days.
you on
And I
to talk
promise.
about. Look, the point. Look, do you want to just go to closings? Is that what we want to do? Like Wick attacks me and says how wrong I am on specifics, and when I talk about the specifics, he's like,
I told you, pick a day next week and we'll set something up, buddy.
Sure, buddy.
Okay.
You pick the topic,
Okay.
we'll pick a day, and you can
Pick
get
a
wrecked.
moderator if you like. Okay.
I don't
here's we
need a
go.
moderator.
Anyone but
Nonetheless,
anyone
closing
but fucking
statements.
anyone I've banned in my Discord. Here.
Sure.
Okay.
I don't need
Gang.
moderator.
We've had a show. It's been a show. Tomorrow we have we're gonna change it up. Harmony Ginger is gonna be joining me, and we're gonna be talking gaming. We're not gonna be talking politics tomorrow. We're gonna be talking gaming. It'll be fun. Friday we're gonna have Tuna Chip and Fairy Queen on. We're gonna be talking about girl bosses. That should be fun.
Ooh.
And yeah, I don't know. I think we've done a show today. But yeah, and all the people in chat who saying I'm a shit mod, well, okay, fair enough. Find one that's better. I'm sorry that I didn't suck your favorite panelist dick all day, and I actually challenged on things. And I know that's what you want, right? Sign up to his OnlyFans if you want to see that. That's not what we're gonna do here. Have you ever seen my show? I jump in all the time. I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, whatever. I don't care. Go away. Brianna, and then we're gonna give Rob the last word. Brianna, go ahead.
God. I just to end my suffering. Let me out of here. I'm good.
Okay. Elder Jazzy.
This is closing. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I really wish we could have talked more about how far out we could legally challenge and arrest and fine people in these institutions. I think it's a really good point. I think that it just sort of got hand waved, and I wish I could have seen more of that. And everything else I was going to say kind of got wiped out of my brain when Wick said that there's apparently a video on Rob's OnlyFans of Wick blowing Rob. So you really fucked me up when you said that.
Yeah, that was sketchy.
So that's all I got.
Is that gonna be what the takeaway is? Not what I said, but where can people find you, Elder Jazzy?
But thank you for having me.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Where can they find you? He asks.
Yeah.
Drazi.
Hello?
Shout yourself out, Drazi. Where can you be found?
Oh, you cut out when you said that. I'm on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Kick. But follow me on YouTube. That's the best one.
But what is the YouTube channel name? Like, spell it out so people can.
Oh, it's everything's Elder Drazi.
Okay, thank you.
All of it.
Parallax, please.
I worked a full shift today. Okay.
I just love like that now that like we're not on the in the discussion. Rob is like so kindly like where can my people find you?
I get annoyed at Rob, but I actually like Rob. Rob, I would consider friendly. We haven't hung out, so we're not friends yet, but we're friendly, even though we're gonna fight next week, maybe.
All right, jerk him off on your OnlyFans later.
Yeah.
Let's get out of here. This was one of the discussions of all time. Thank you guys for having me, for being here. I think that we could have done a lot more justice to the topic of how the degradation of trust in institutions and how we can fix it. But spirited discussion is always fun. So appreciate y'all. Have a good night.
Peace out, Girl Scout.
Twitch.tv/parallax, x.com/parallax, etc.
Rob Nor.
Nice to see you, homie. Long time.
Just to finish, I think that you have to identify the problem first. The fact that people are saying, yeah, we agree it could be corrupt. We could agree that they're distrustworthy. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying these institutions are blatantly corrupt. Institutions like the media are no longer journalists. The mainstream media are propagandists. The government is corrupt in ways that it's almost hard to comprehend. The medical industry is corrupt in ways that's almost difficult to comprehend. And the fact that people can't defend those specific points and instead want to say, sure, we agree with you. What can we do to solve it? Well, what to do to solve it's going to look vastly different based on the scale of how bad you think the corruption or the incompetence is. And so if we can't agree on that, then how it's going to looks different. I think that it's evident that the people couldn't keep up on specifics on this, and they want to sort of just have sort of ad hom attacks. I don't feel bad about it all, though. I like doing panels like this. I don't have hard feelings to anyone here. I think you can see the usual characters that want to start off with these sort of smears that then get upset when you reciprocate with a similar tone. But I don't wish anyone ill here. I hope all their channels thrive and they're all happy people, have families, have kids, and those sort of things will make you happier than anything. Plus, we need to get those birth rates up. So Rob Noor, you can find me at Normal America with Rob Noor on YouTube. Rob Noor spelled Noerr on pretty much every other platform. Be interested to debate whoever wants on this panel on any of these specific topics or any topic of their choice anytime in the future that I'm available.
Okay. Gang, I hate you all, but I love you at the same time. We're going to go and we're going to raid out into Tuna Chip and say hi to him. I love
Thanks.
you all. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.